Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, I have John Sanei. I've been looking forward to our session today. He's joining from South Africa, from Cape Town, but he will be going back to Dubai, who is a nomad that goes where the sun and work takes him. So welcome, John.
Wonderful to be with you, Ross. Thank you so much.
So John is not only revolutionizing the way we approach the future, but he's also equipping us with the courage and determination needed to bring about lasting change. So he's a globally renowned keynote speaker. In fact, we've got some things in common. We both went to Singularity University back in 2017. He's a futures strategist, 5-time best-selling author. He's actually also now a faculty at SU and at Duke CE faculty member as well. Just a list of many, many accolades and things, everything that mixes neuroscience, people, technology, sitting on boards, and also got his own podcast at nearly 150 episodes at the Expansive. So, and lots of books, you know, the 5 that I've mentioned, one of them, Who Do We Become? What a great title, all around this discovery of self-evolution. And John really brings this unique blend of neuroscience and philosophy and psychology and loads of other things from words like quantum science and business strategy, blends it all together in awesome talks with a bit of comedy. But coming from a single mum family with a desire to prove himself, as many of us have, to making money and this drive to have more, has now shifted to how do I have greater impact? So my first question for you, John, is what sparked that transition and mindset from, I want to have more, I want to make more money, to actually I want to have greater impact?
Great question to start with, and thank you. I turned 40. I think that's what it was, you know. I went from me to we. I also got a divorce at 40 and decided to take a whole new angle in my career. And I really started speaking and writing books only at 40. You know, pre-40, I had different agencies, I was chasing. And after my divorce, I just thought, you know, what is it that I really prioritize? And I realized that for my whole life, I'd been somebody who had been teaching in one way or another without really teaching, like it wasn't formalized. But I figured out to see things differently, or was gifted to see things differently. And at 40, I just formalized it. You know, I put it into a structure. I decided to give it a talk. And that talk became a book. The book became a bestseller. I became the first faculty member in Africa out of nothing, really. I mean, it was like 1 year in, and all of a sudden, everything was almost like aligned and exponentially moving on to the next level. And, you know, when they say the right place, right time, saying the right thing. And that just seemed like I got momentum so early on in my career. And now I travel around the world, you know, and I lecture at a bunch of different universities, and I've never been to university. I've never really gone through the academic process. And when my friends from school see me, all of them are a little bit gobsmacked at the fact that the guy got expelled, it just couldn't pass. I just hated school. It just wasn't for me. But here I am teaching and helping and uplifting. And yeah, it's been quite the ride and quite enjoyable.
It's interesting, isn't it? What are the events? Sometimes it's reaching a certain age, as you mentioned, you know, 40, and we reevaluate, you know, the modern elder work that goes on in that kind of world and area. Sometimes it's a transition of divorce, a job transition and role, or maybe in some cases it's all three, and maybe even a mix of some other things that we get exposed to and people we meet and conversations that help us see new things. And as we know, we can only connect the dots backwards, right? And so as we
Absolutely.
try to think about things of experimenting and trying, who do we become? You know, what is next? And there was John 1.0, John 2.0, and for many of us will have each of these chapters. And
right.
I'm interested then, so going from that, I've got to make money, I want more things, this is the version of me, and those transitions to impact, what were some of the practical things that actually happened? You mentioned, started keynote speaking, started doing these things. What was going on in some of those details of that, John?
I think in the background, I was doing a lot of self-reflection, and I started doing some shamanic work. And I was doing the South American ayahuasca ceremonies, the San Pedro ceremonies. I was doing meditation retreats because I'd found myself not fulfilled. You know, my marriage had failed. I didn't know why. My businesses weren't taking off like I thought they would. So I was just like a little bit frustrated. And I think I just went and dived deep into just discovering myself, discovering my motivating factors, understanding my blocks. And boy, did I open up a can of worms. My God. I mean, I think, I guess all of us are carrying lineage issues and challenges and emotional blockages that are sometimes not even ours. We've learned them from our parents. And so there's a lot of that clearing that was going on. And I often say, and I've written about it in my third book, I think, that we all have a pocket of genii, as the Romans call it, genius above our heads. And our job in life is just to access that genius. Steve Jobs talks about it in his famous Stanford University speech. And it was really that, without me knowing what I was doing, just from a point of emotional frustration and psychological challenge, not achieving what I wanted to achieve. And once I started doing that work, you know, new things became available, new aspects of myself became apparent. And that started leading me to really started to follow the golden thread of my curiosity and fascination, which led me to writing books and giving talks. And here I am on your podcast.
I often think there is a divine intervention of frequency going on in the world, of where things show up for people and for society at times. I was having a conversation this morning with the founder of Coaches Rising, Joel, and his partner, and we, on a similar subject, we're talking about shamanic work, plant ceremonies, and my business partner, Mike, has been on a lot of those similar discoveries, you know, over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, to do that deep work, to deal with personal trauma, lineage trauma, to then open up new dimensions, new possibilities. And then when you mentioned about the genii and genius, I don't know if you've ever seen the TED Talk by the lady who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And
Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah, she talks about genius and the origin being an external, not a person, you know, and we've got confused through time to think, oh, John's a genius. And no, it's an external piece, was the origins, and that we channel that and use it as a muse. And what a difference the responsibility feels when you go, oh, John's a genius, versus John is connected to channel
access is
genius. And your thought of, oh, they hover above us in the Roman, and allowing that to channel through, I think is a really interesting just perspective to have. And also just, you know, she was saying, well, I'm going to turn up ready to do my work. So genius, you need to turn up as well and do it, not me, you know, of that.
Right. I like that. It's almost it's like not taking on the responsibility, right?
Yeah. And then allowing a better flow. And flow happens in play. It happens in, as you mentioned, curiosity. And when our chemicals and our neuroscience, when we're in a state of stress, actually we're less intelligent, we're less able to experiment, we're less able to do these things. We go into armament or disengagement. And so we need to figure some of that out. And I'm really curious to dive deeper into some of the research, some of the work where you talk about the difference between, say, a hardwire upgrade for humanity and a software upgrade. Can you talk more to that, John?
Yeah, of course. Just very quickly, just on your comment there of accessing your genius. You know, I think we are electrical beings. And I often think we have to increase our capacity to hold more electricity. And in the process of healing trauma, we create a container that contains more energy. And if you think about the fact that if we hold more light as a being, we become brighter and we see further and we become a life torch. And, you know, some people, you can see the light shining inside them. And it's like, it's literally more capacity to hold more light, which is just more of you, which means that you're accessing your genius in many ways. So anyway, that's one point.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I started my career off very, very eager to share my excitement with the audiences I was speaking to about the future. And, you know, when I first started off, it was all about the zero marginal cost society of Jeremy Rifkin. It was all about Peter Diamandis' exponentiality. It was all the good old, you know, the good old futures ideas. And I loved it. I mean, I was just so enamored by all these things. But I found that every time I left an audience, I kind of left them worse than I found them. And it was, I was scaring them. Even though I was getting excited, they were not sharing this excitement with me. And so after the second or third book, I really started diving into psychology, and I started writing about psychology and the psychology of change. Why is it that our psychology doesn't let us? And it was all about trauma, victimhood, and the things that I was struggling with in my software, in my psychology. But, you know, over the last year, I've started asking myself this question. We've all read Atomic Habits. We've all read Brené Brown. We've all watched her TED Talk. We watched Simon Sinek. We've watched all them all. We've read Carl Jung. We've read James Hollis. Who hasn't? Everybody's read some psychological book, if not 50, you know? And guess what? We're all still anxious. People are still stressed. People are still not celebrating the unknown, the unfamiliarity. They're not creative. They're not allowing that flow to happen, even after being students of all these psychological books. So I decided that psychology is not enough. Not in the way we are evolving into this future. We don't have the philosophy in our heads to deal with an entity that's smarter than us, like AI. And so psychology is not good enough anymore. And we have to think about new ways of upgrading our consciousness and our brains. And so I call it hardware upgrade, not software upgrade. Software upgrade's done. Think about your Apple One. You can't upgrade an iOS 20 into an Apple One. It just doesn't have the capacity to hold the speed, the battery, the everything in that hardware of that phone is just not available to hold the complexity of what's going on in the world. And the research shows us that everybody's got a different number, but between 8 and 12% of our brain is actually being utilized and really being governed by the Industrial Revolution's educational system of fitting in, not fitting out. Not about accessing genius and curiosity, but following a system that will allow us to bring maximum efficiency to the world. Very valid for the last 200 years, but very invalid as we move into a world that's got nothing to do with efficiencies and straight lines. It's got to do with patterns that don't repeat themselves, and it requires our uniqueness as a currency for the future so that we can come together in small teams and solve problems and move out again. You know, we don't have to be in these centralized systems anymore. But the thing is that in order for us to feel safe enough, to feel creative enough, to feel like we can access our genius, what we have to do is develop new capacity in our brains. Psychology is not going to get us there. It's almost a neuroscience job. And so what does this mean? It means, how do we make our brains malleable? Just as simple as that. That's actually as simple as it gets. And we've never been to gym to make our brains malleable. We went to gym once for 4 years and for 12 years and then 4 years and then maybe another year or two after that. And our brains were set for the rest of our lives, and that was it. And today, as Alvin Toffler says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be the ones who cannot read and cannot write, but the ones who cannot unlearn to relearn. And then Albert Einstein says you cannot solve a problem from the same energy that you created. You cannot solve a problem from the same energy you created it from. And then you have another quote from Einstein who says, the medicine of the future will be the medicine of frequency. And so if you take all three of those quotes together and you say, well, how do I unlearn? Why am I trying to solve the problem of the future, which is unknown, from a point of stress, anxiousness, and addiction to certainty? And how do I increase my frequency? Because Einstein keeps coming up with these chirps that seem very modern, but they're actually 110 years old. What was this guy on about? And let me just quickly about Einstein is his best ideas would come to him in a low alpha, high theta brainwave when he was rocking himself in front of a fireplace to sleep exhausting himself between his research papers. So you start to understand he had accessed different brain waves. His brain was becoming malleable. He was the master. of shifting his frequency to hold more light and access his genius. That's what he did. Something that I think all of us have available to us. So in my research for the last, sorry, carry on.
That's all right. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of points because it's so fascinating when we look at a few things and people try to theorize about significant jumps in human knowledge and human intelligence, and some of the pieces around when was language formed. There's some talk and evidence where certain psychedelics and mushrooms played a part in opening up new synapses in the brain.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that links a lot to where you're talking about is where were we in this sort of lucid state to allow new synapses to open up,
Yes.
to see things from perspectives, because we are a filter machine of familiar. And we
Yes.
then look and spot what is not familiar to identify that and evaluate, is it risk or not? And that's
Yes.
what we've honed our system in. And I think
Yes.
that certain psychedelics, you know, there's loads of evidence around, you know, LSDs or psilocybin or all of these things that are great for problem solving. Great for problem
Yes.
solving when it is things that traditional methods of looking at the data, analytics,
Yes.
aren't functioning, when we need imagination, when we need
Yes.
creativity. And
Yes.
the challenge then in that state, that can we channel it by ourselves through deep meditation, rocking, or with the help of other plants? And
Yes.
can we do that when we're in a state of high stress and under war and pressure of our bodies and brains? Probably unlikely. So the more we need it, the less likely we are to go and get it without the help of other things. So sorry, I'll let you carry on, but it just really sparked some things around where we might find new discoveries for the next version of what we need to become and evolve into.
Yeah, Ross, you're spot on. And I think what you've got to realize is that education system and organizational system never asked us to be imaginative. It asked us to follow a system. So we actually haven't been trained in being imaginative. And we do imagine, but we do it in the worst way possible. It's called anxiousness. We catastrophize the tomorrow, which is the dumbest way to use imagination. Like it's the lowest form of imagination to actually catastrophize tomorrow, rather than using it to developing fantasies and dreams to come true. As Einstein says, again, I mean, I don't know why I quote Einstein all the time. I think he has more credibility than anybody else, but he says, imagination is more important than knowledge. It's the forthcoming attractions of life. And we don't play this game. We think it's like, woo-wah-wah, you know, we think it's like this airy fairy sort of ideology, but it's quantum science. It's like, it's not some lentil eating, sandal wearing methodology, right? So
it's as we shift
also,
from this low frequency to a higher frequency.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So the schooling system and the organizational systems have in them something called deadlines. And the word deadline does not make you feel creative and imaginative. It makes you feel anxious and stressed. And it's been baked into our thinking. That's why most of the world is addicted to a high beta brainwave. And so now welcome and cue AI. Panic, just absolute panic around the world for two reasons. One, we're addicted to panic. So if it's not this, it's CNN. If it's not CNN, it's the pound. If it's not the pound, it's the crypto. I mean, it's always something to panic about. And then two, rightfully so, panicking because AI is going to replace you in your current state of intelligence. And not just replace you, far outplay you in your current state of stress and intelligence. So what we have to do, and this is what I'm starting to figure out just over the last few months, is in a state of alpha, in a state of calm heart, clear mind, your fascination is not linked to an outcome. It's fascinated with what you're busy with. It's not worried about a critical voice telling you you're fat, ugly, and haven't been as successful as you want to be, because that's the beta brainwave giving you the survival chit chat. In an alpha, you're collaborative, adaptable, excited, optimistic, and literally creating an imagination stream of positivity into the future. It is the formula within itself that will solve whatever problem you're having, not by solving an outcome, but actually just getting busy with who you are. And this is what people don't want to, they don't understand it, because high beta says outcome only over everything else.
And we've functioned to solve the challenges we've had. And management has been part of that, productivity has been part of that, and that works perfectly in this linear world. Shift to an exponential world, and we need a new operating system. And we're living in this transition paradox. And the paradox where, yes, we can go, necessity is the mother of all innovation, and we can say, do you know what? We're going to innovate and be creative when Apollo 13's plummeting and we're in high stakes and high pressure and we turn up and we show up. And equally, we're under so much that we can't function anymore. How can we have a paradox where both of those things can be true, where we can still operate creatively, irrelevant of the situation? And I think that's the higher piece we can get to of adaptability intelligence, is to be able to get to a point where, it's not all about I'm reaching in this beautiful, playful, creative space. And it's not do away with, it's under high pressure, high stress, can't be creative in there, so I'll remove it all. How can we be creative in both? How can we live in a world? Because I do believe the world is definitely complex, is definitely more uncertain, and there's going to be more stress and pressure. So how can we, in the same way, embrace AI, not to say it's going to, do all of this dystopian? How can we embrace that? The same way, how can we embrace higher brainwave, more area for creativity that science has, at the same time as how can we still operate when it's life and death? And it reminds me, in my book, I talk about the Monkey King in Kung Fu, and being playful at the point of death. And so if we can have that element that it's not, we can't fully control our environment, our context, or our situation to be beautiful to go and play, but we can behave in that way, maybe. And maybe we can enter that cocoon of thought even when we're under that pressure. What's your thought around that? Is that just a theorized, nonsensical, or is that something that we can maybe explore?
I think that from a point of view of evolved human functioning, that is obvious. We are really like Neanderthals when it comes to using our brains. We think there's an arrogance to our lack of understanding of what's next, and then we block it. And arrogance is always a sign of an ignorant person. It's not somebody that's adaptive and in the flow state. And people are addicted to lives they don't even like. And they are familiar in those addictions and familiar in those challenges. And when you ask them to step out of it, they fight you to step away from what they don't like. They don't like to move away from it. And if you speak to them too much about quantum and timelines, they tell you that you're a hippie, because they're looking for anything and everything that doesn't fit into their construct of thinking. They delete, distort, and generalize it, and then kick it out. And they don't even know they're doing it. That's the genius of the current state of a high beta brainwave. It just ignores all of it. So playfulness and everything that you've mentioned is obvious in an evolved being. It is totally silly and ridiculous in a survival mindset, because you think a lion is coming to eat you. Now, I'm a big fan of AQ, and I love that you've written about it. And I think it was the first thing that I really cottoned on about you when you reached out. I call it AQ squared. And the reason is that in order to be totally adaptable, you have to be hyper aware of as many data points as possible, so that you can make as best decisions as possible. And in order to be able to be a machine of data, like bring in as much data as you can, you have to have an alpha brainwave, because in a beta brainwave, you don't have the energy to engage with new information. And in fact, if you're in too much of a high beta brainwave, you wake up exhausted, let alone go to sleep exhausted. And so what you need is most probably a sugar hit as often as possible. And you'll say that you've got a sweet tooth, but actually what you're doing is desperate for any form of energy, because you're revving your engine of your brain at 7,000 revs in second gear. And you've been doing so your whole life. And you don't know why you're sick and your body's not working well and you got fog brain. It's obvious, because you don't know what you're doing with your operating system. And so awareness and adaptability need to be cousins that work together.
100%. And it aligns really well to one of our 15 subdimensions of mental flexibility, to have cognitive flexibility, to appreciate competing paradoxes, new information, things that aren't inside our echo chamber. And then, as you mentioned very early on, We collaborated a lot with Barry O'Reilly on unlearning and the key component of that. And it's all of the interplay between how do I adapt as my abilities, my character of why I adapt. Is it burning platform or burning ambition? Is it, all those different components? And then our environment, when do we adapt? Do I have psychological safety in my team? Am I too stressed out to do it and we're measuring work stress? Or do I have the company support or the emotional health to channel these things? And when we have this, intelligence to do something, I think it's even more complex in the multimodality of that a lot of these things we think cognitively. And you mentioned about the same energy that created a problem can't solve it. So if we're thinking about problems all being solved through thinking, we're also limiting ourselves. And I think the channeling, I did a deep course last year around the neuroscience of change that opened up even my mind around, the density of neurons is deeper in the fascia of underneath our skin than it is in our brains. And where we hold trauma, in a sense, in our bodies and our body intelligence, our gut intelligence, all of these things, that we can't just think our way out of it. And one of the things that resonated with me of a particular piece in coaching and things is mood, mantra, and movement. And so if we combine a sense of physical movement of how are our bodies when we're stressed? Where do we feel it? We got heat, we got energy, we got tension, we got a frequency, to what will that be like to tell our bodies before our brains can then respond? It's all around coherence, our heart rate variability. It's why deep breathing and meditation actually just reorientates the nervous system. And I think we're uncovering multiple intelligences that aren't just cognitive, but are deep ones that maybe some of the shamanic work can unlock of what our bodies are. And it reminds me of something around the state and setting influencing the type of journeys we go on when we do plant ceremony type work.
Of course.
And the same when we're trying to be creative. What is our state and what's our setting? And some of those things being really intentional, rather than, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. AI is coming. We've got to do this. What's our state and what's our setting? And being very deliberate about that to unlock the genii, to unlock the potential of those things. And I'm curious in some of what you're doing right now. So some of the research that you're doing right now, I listened to your podcast that was just launched today around, everybody's talking about AI and what it's going to do and what it's not going to do, and some of the research. What's some of your thinking about how are you using it? How is it helping you? How's it augmenting John to be more creative, more productive, more prolific? What are some of the practical areas that you're exploring right now?
Well, one of the, it's weird because I'm using it to go deep futures. I'm playing with deep futures. I'm giving it prompts around including neuroscience and converging technologies, and taking the latest of neuroscience and latest of technology, and take me 10, 15 years into the future with food, and take me 10, 15 years into the future with whatever sector I'm thinking about and wanting to play with. And so it's helping me almost create new neurons in my brain of the possibilities of the convergence of human evolution and technological advancement. And so that's my favorite thing to do with it. I have changed my teams around me. I have less people around me. I'm paying less salaries. I am using it more for responding and creating sales processes and following that. I am helping, I'm finding it helpful in decoding my videos. I've got 350 videos, summarizing them, making them blog posts, using them for SEO. I'm at every point in every service provider. I'm looking at it, looking how I could use it, trying to figure out how I could actually streamline things. And all the while doing all of this, I know that the rules of SEO might change, and the rules of strategy might change. And I know this is coming. I mean, so I'm just I'm enjoying the beginnings of it. Eventually, it's going to be ubiquitously available and entrenched into every aspect of our lives, which we'll just take for granted, like electricity is, I guess, in many ways. So yeah, I'm not writing another book. Just by the way, I think bookshops are on their way out, just like HMV and Virgin Records went. I don't see the need for bookstores when you got ubiquitous words and geniuses at your fingertips, which is a bit of a sad thing, but I mean, it is. I think that's what's going to be happening. So look, in all and every way that I plan my life, I'm using it.
You're using it. It's interesting, isn't it? If we look at a 2-year-old child, 3-year-old child, and we give them a new tool, we give them a pen, and they explore with all sorts of things that they do with it. Some which we go, yes, that's good. Put it on a piece of A4 paper, and that's cool. Put it on the wall, and we go, no, that's not good. But they play with it in all sorts of different ways to discover, what does it feel like? What does it look like? Can I put it in my mouth? Can I bury it in with the soil? Can I use it to stand something on? Can I create a sculpture? And because we are naive, we create wider perspectives. As we go through life, we become more and more biased by experience. And experience used to be the advantage. Now experience is the disadvantage.
Exactly.
So I think the unique opportunity we've got here is that we have a tool that can open up that, oh, we're talking about bias. Well, I'm already biased. I'm a bias machine because of my background, my upbringing, my beliefs. And, whilst I try to go and expose myself to people who don't look like me, think like me, behave like me, most of the time it makes me feel uncomfortable. Whereas with AI, I can go and see some of those perspectives without feeling some of that uncomfort. So if I look at things, and so show me looking at this from 10 different angles, from all of these different bits, and I can explore to open up my diversity of thought in maybe a slightly more playful, comfortable place than where a parent's telling me off or my subconscious brain is telling me off, because that's different. So I'm like you. I've been deep, full on in every way, just to play in there. And I've got really deep in the prompt engineering and prompt chain theory of how do I create more and more depth and work and thinking, and as a collaborative muse and partner.
It is.
It is just really, really interesting. At the same time, like humans, it hallucinates, it makes stuff up. I make stuff up. And we need to be able to understand that and, build some of those things. And, we don't know. And this is part of the scary part of it. And I've got two sort of thoughts and two friends. One who's trying to build things that's a glass box, that you have transparency, that you understand what it did to make those decisions, make those predictions, make those thoughts.
I've heard you can't.
And others where it's the black box and it's figuring it out and you don't know. And
you don't know.
Do I even know how I made a decision?
Exactly.
Right?
I was waiting for you to finish to say that. Yeah.
It's hard work. It's hard work.
It is.
And so I'm excited. I'm playful like you. I'm encouraged to think about how this will accelerate our creativity. I think differently about the books. I think we'll see an explosion of everybody and their, mother and daughter creating loads, because the difference between those that are written and those that are read is massive. So I think we'll see a proliferation of it, and then maybe they become living books, a bit like Salim Ismail, the latest version of Exponential Organizations is a living book. And you can talk to the book in certain ways. So we might see books slightly differently. But what's your sort of...
That's a good point.
Some of those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. Books could evolve. I guess, everybody's going to go into hyper productivity and then realize that it can do it itself without you, because now all of a sudden you're hyper productivity.
Noise versus signal,
Yeah, exactly. So I guess books will do the same. Everybody now can write a book, and so initially there'll be a proliferation of it. But I was hearing today, somebody did a remix with Jay-Z on a rap song.
Yeah,
and it wasn't Jay-Z.
Yeah, really good,
dude.
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
So
you can't stop it.
We can, replicate voice from 3-second piece, the emotion, the tonality of everything. So what is the copyright issues? We know there's all those things. So Jay-Z, yes, has been replicated. We can prompt outputs in multimodality. So we can do it in text. We know GPT. The stable diffusion guys that are now being able to output images, it's 60 frames per second. So in real time. So film is 24 frames. So we can input a script and output a movie in real time.
Yeah.
And we can also do music. So we can input, I want it more emotional. I want to use symbols. And it will create your WAV. So
dude,
all
this
of
is the end of Hollywood.
Well, it's going to be an evolution of Hollywood. So
well, if you can make a movie yourself about your daughter that stutters and you want to make her the star of the movie with her pets, what's Hollywood? What's Hollywood
and the co-star of Bradley Cooper, because you want to, exactly. Well, you can do that.
And so, exactly.
I think Hollywood is a collaboration of creative people that come around a storyline and communicate that storyline. So I think the collaboration muses that do this will be in a variety of different ways. And to come to your point of, there is light, high frequency applications, and there's also dark. My brother's in-laws were scammed because one of their friends apparently phoned them up, needed help. It sounded like Don. It wasn't Don.
Wow.
And they lost $9,000, and these are vulnerable people. They've been, really, they've got, a daughter and a son who've been really looking after their parents, being really super cautious and aware of scams and all of these things. They're very intelligent. It's in Canada, it's westernized, and yet still fell foul of this because the technology now isn't just somebody phoning up randomly to do some phishing. It's somebody that sounds like the full emotion of that individual. So there's no doubt there's, dark side and good side of all things.
Look, isn't that just what life's about? You need valleys and peaks. I call it digital dictatorships and blockchain democracies. So you really have both ways of doing this. You have the dark side and the light side, just like you explained. And I think what we have to also realize is when we become more light, we create more light, we focus on more light, and it becomes a very incredible privilege of choice that we have to work towards doing this as a collective. It's a collective practice to collectively create a world we want to be moving into and not be trapped by the dark side of things, And so when you look at the sort of timeline jumps and quantum mechanics of reality, you get an opportunity to actually move up the scale of experience by changing your hardware and your focus and your energy, So without sounding too ethereal, the quantum science of our human beings and evolving become of paramount importance, not about another PhD and MBA. This is now not measuring success in that way anymore. Now we're measuring success in your EQ, in your ability for AQ. It's the new skill that's required. And most people just think that's airy-fairy, and that's the real problem.
It made me think a couple of things. Maybe we'll look back at this moment as a transition of which of our current lived dimension in the multiverse that we're on is this, I'm not sure if the right name of it, but I used to play it called Othello, where you had white and black little circles and you would turn them over based on certain pieces. And I don't know if you ever watched on Netflix, there was a series called Physical 100. It was a Korean series. And they were trying to find what is the perfect physique. And from strength to all sorts of things. And they had these 100, amazing people from all sorts of walks of life. So from Olympic gymnasts to strength people to models to all sorts, and put them through various challenges. And it made me think that they had this floor sequence where there is big floor tiles, white on one side, black on another side, and they were competing against each other. And you had to go and turn over the black to white, and then the person behind you was turning it back to white and black. And they were going round, and the exhaustion and energy to do this and the strength. And at some point, there's just so much more white that you're never going to catch up with getting it to black. And maybe at this point for humanity, if we can turn over the uses more, that the exponential goes to better use, no matter how much darkness there is, maybe it's going
Doesn't
to be
matter.
quashed,
Shut it down.
that it can be
Yes.
shut down by that. Whether that's true or not, it just came in my mind as you were talking.
I like it.
About that.
No, again, I think, you know, we are moving into a magical Harry Potter kind of world. It seems like the weirdest things are happening, and we're like, yeah. And also, I mean, let's not forget about aliens are about to land as well. It's almost like we got two of these like intelligent species, in fact, much more intelligent than us, like almost arriving at the same time. This is really radical, man. This is like a movie. We're like living in a movie, you know, and we have to take on the sword on the hero's journey, to go on this journey of ourselves, to slay the dragon of intelligence and awaken some evolution within ourselves and everybody around us. And so, you know, my talks have changed dramatically, you know, over the last 6 months. Like people are like, in fact, today I was being briefed by somebody and he was like, I need you to come in and, you know, give them hope. I said, I can't do that. I can't come and give you hope, because what I've got to give you is a big dose of responsibility for your own self. When you take on that responsibility, you got hope. If you don't take on the responsibility, I'm lying to you. Like, you're not moving into something easy and you know, a ride in the park.
I think a lot of it comes down to our perspective, our beliefs, our core values, and that envisagement, that imagination of how do we want to leave it for the generations behind? What is the deep work that we're going to lay down now in these decisions and choices as we play? And I like to think of it not around slaying. It's a bit like when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. Western is about, we've got to fight it, we've got to beat it, we've got to cut it out. Generalizing, Eastern and a lot of the other protocols is, it has the ability to return to healthy cells. I love you, cancer. How can I evolve you back to functioning? And so that is the yin yang. That is the paradox. And I think technology, AI, is it slay? Is it fight? Is it challenge? Or is it channeling? Is it building in through us? Bit like genii, that we have this. And can I allow it to flow through my light to express itself in ways that beams out goodness, rather than, no, I've got to beat that beam or that thing down. Interestingly, you mentioned about hope. We've done a lot of science and research around hope, and in Snyder's work, sort of three components. To have hope, we have to have a vision. Otherwise, what are we being hopeful for? So if we have a vision, and there's two other key components. One is agency and one is pathways. So if I have a vision and I have the agency, i.e. the skills to do it, I'm going to be more hopeful. If I have the pathways, the strategies, I'm going to be more hopeful. Any one of those components that don't exist, and I'm then doubtful, or I'm hopelessness, or I'm fearful because I don't have the strategy and pathway, or I don't have the skills or agency to execute that pathway to achieve that vision. And so that thought of hope being a airy fairy to what's the science behind some of those things, that we can then start to understand more of a practical implementation or interventions that we can build. So we're lacking some hope here. What is it? Because we're not clear about the vision or goal. Or is it because we haven't got the strategies yet? Or we got the strategies, but we haven't got the skills. And so when we break it down in that way, we can start to build hope. And in our data, hope is positively correlated across all dimensions of adaptability, from environmental to character to our own skills.
Love it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So as we come to a close, John, there's two bits. One that I ask everybody at the end is around curiosity. And it's, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it? But before you answer that, was there anything that you wanted me to ask you that I didn't?
No, there isn't. I've had
we covered lots, hey? We covered aliens. We covered aliens. We covered AI. So let's hit the curiosity.
The curiosity aspect for me is, I went to Costa Rica and I abseiled down a waterfall. I mean, I in the rain. That was when I woke up in the morning and we had booked this like whole day out and it was raining, I was like, man, this is the last thing I feel like doing. Anyway, we went ahead and did it. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic. It was quite a physical thing to do. as far as curiosity is concerned, you know, I made a decision 7 years ago, 6 years ago. There's a teacher that has an equation to life, and his equation is simple. He says, follow your highest excitement at every moment of every day with zero expectation. By doing this, you realize that excitement is a very, very important emotion. It gives you insights into connecting with your genii, which really excitement is another way of saying curiosity. And so I've been following my curiosity, and magic has happened around me. Like I said to you off air or on air, it was like things have just opened up for me because I'm just enthusiastic. And the word enthusiastic means enthew from the Greek, with God or with your genius, because that's really what it means at the end of the day. And so really curiosity is very much in my life in many, many aspects of it. And I'm very happy, but that was a very conscious decision I made, that I will not do things I'm not good at. I'm not in that camp of people that says I have to force myself to be good at accounting when numbers look Chinese to me. It's just the way it is. That's why I was terrible at school, because I was forced to do things my brain didn't want to do. So curiosity is a big theme of my life. I speak about it a lot, and I show people that many people don't even know how to be curious because they've never been taught to be curious. And so they sit in a panic that they haven't found their passion yet or their purpose. And it's like, well, you haven't really asked that question, really, have you? So the golden thread of curiosity, I'm very lucky that it's all part of my life. So I can't tell you when the last time I didn't, because every time I see something that I haven't tried, I'm rushing towards it. I'm like, bring it. Let's just jump in and dive in and see what happens, you know?
And we build that muscle, right? We build that muscle to not fear the unknown. And in an unpredictable world where we're transitioning from things like we valued answers and knowledge, we're now transitioning to valuing questions and imagination. And so that transition is going to be exciting, energy and motion for some. It's going to be runaway and fearful for others. But how can we make sure that we leave no one behind in that transition for their highest potential is so valuable work to be done.
Look, I think also that idea of leaving nobody behind, that's a real personal journey, you know. It is their,
and it's relative. It's relative to them.
It's relative, exactly.
100% relative.
I think as a Western society, we often project our expectations, and it's a rubbish expectation. You know, we're living in Dubai. There's a caste system, and it's weird when you initially go there because you have certain people that are just feel themselves lower than you, and you think it's unfair, but they think they're having the best time in their lives. You're projecting your requirements onto them. They're having a blast. But here we are, like, you know, all the sort of like stories that how wrong it is. I'm like, guy, have you met them? They're like, they're having the best time. Their families at home are going to school now because of what's happening for them, you know? So yes, that leaving people behind is a big one. You know, for me, it's like, look, here are the tools. I'm not taking responsibility if you want to jump on. That becomes your pure, incredible privilege of choice. And that's why you have it. And I'll just show you what I'm doing. Yeah, exactly.
Last piece, it reminds me of the experience very similar that you just described that I had. I had the opportunity to do some deep work with the UN. And I went out to the Kibera slums in Nairobi, one of the largest slums in the world, about 1 million inhabitants.
I've driven past it,
And we went inside and met, you know, a lot of interesting individuals, sort of in effect, the mayor of the slums, and he took us around.
The gang boss.
Not really, actually.
No, wasn't he?
It wasn't gang orientated. It was more around. They had, interestingly, a health center where they'd educated things like epilepsy was that was the devil. They weren't allowed out of the huts, but now education has come out to say that no, it's not the devil, and that's you know, work to be done. So they had everything in this center, from medical to education to all sorts of things. Average sort of $2 a day transactions, you know, single soap usage, single batteries, all sorts of bits, and many of them were profoundly happy.
That's, you know,
and
happy.
It was so, exactly. It was so enlightening for me that my projection of comparison versus relative to them And
Yes.
so what is our identity? What's our future version of ourselves? And to be able to gift that through decision, deliberate choice, not through being taken away and sacrifice and scarcity. So how do people get in touch with you,
Lovely.
John, if they've been inspired by you, want to get you to hang out and keynote for them whilst humans are still doing the keynotes? How do they get in touch?
Look, for the next 6 months, you'll get me in the flesh coming to you directly.
Yeah.
Well, Ross, I've been very inspired by you. Thank you. I've never been on a podcast where I've taken notes. So thank you so much for your work and your sort of research. I can see you're very much as passionate about this as I am. So wonderful to meet another soul doing this sort of work. There are 8 billion people in the world, and there's only one John Sanei. I mean, what are the chances of that? I am winning in the name category. And so John Sanei, Sanei, I'm across all socials. I'm across all the internet and the interweb. I am constantly sharing and I'm always making videos, putting posts out, sharing my knowledge. But in fact, a shamanic ceremony once told me, John, you're about to access your most powerful version of yourself. We just want to give you the one rule. The rule is, if you stop sharing, you stop getting access, because the information is not for you, it's for everybody else. So use it like that. And since that, I just haven't stopped writing. I just can't stop. And so please join me on socials. And yes, for the next 6 months, you're still going to get me live in the flesh coming to do a talk for you. So thank you so much, Ross.
Thank you, John. Been an awesome journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.